time. Let's make a story.
It's time for Comix Kids!
Hey gang, it's Mr. Craig here once again for the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Green Bay, as well as Virtual Boys and Girls Club and, oh, you know what? I should say National Virtual Boys and Girls Club. I should say that from now on because it's a national thing. That's pretty cool. But also Boys and Girls Club Creates. And we are in the midst of our comics series for Comix Kids. And we are now at the point that I've been waiting for a long time. I don't know about you guys, but I've been waiting for this time for a long time. This is where we get a chance to do some coloring finally. Yeah, putting some color on our comic pages. Now, take a look at my page. This is my Baghead page. You guys saw me working on this. This has been a spontaneous build throughout this whole series. And if you look close at this, I actually worked on adding some shading film on it since I saw you last. I thought it would be really neat to have every panel his bag has the shading film on it. So that I'm very pleased with how that turned out. Now, the thing I want to share with you guys today is kind of multiple different ways of coloring it that don't quite use the computer yet. The computer is one of the ways that we can make some color on our final pieces, and it works really, really well. But there's other ways that we can color a comic page. Let's go right down to the most simple of those things. We can use colored pencils. Do you see these sets? Think of one of the colors, and I'll try and grab one out of here. Where'd they go? Oh my gosh. To see how I did that trick, go and watch one of my magic videos. Here's another set of colored pencils. And wow, I'm missing quite a few of the colors, so I don't want to get too fancy here. There's a lot of greens, yellows, blues, blacks, and browns. So I'm going to use the browns strategically. Okay? So I'm going to take my brown, cafe brown. Now I can use this like a normal pencil, like I would normally shade with this. That's one of the things that is kind of cool about working with the colored pencils. And I'm just going to kind of go in here, shade my post, get in a nice dark shade there, go onto this other side, adding some color here, and get the top. Let's see about this other color. Is that the same? Yeah, it looks like it's the same color, so I'm not going to get too fancy with it. But I do need to get some other colors. I want some warmer tones. And now I'm going to just kind of feather across the top of this dock. I want that front edge to be a little bit darker because there's not going to be as much light. But the top part, there's going to be a lot of light coming down onto it. So I'm going to kind of keep it just about like that. That's not too fancy. So now if I go down in here, and I can kind of, and notice I'm shading in the direction of the wood grain. I'm kind of being conscious of the way that light would be hitting something, and I'm shading it to kind of fit those patterns and those plans. Across the top, and get some of that in there. Now here's the front of the dock, and again we're going to make that just a hair shade, just a shade darker than the other side. And we're going to get this in there, and I'm using this colored pencil just like I would use a colored pencil in everyday normal life. I'm using it lightly. I'm not being a Hulk with it. I'm trying to be a ninja. I'm trying to control it and be able to use it to its greatest advantage. And I'm probably going a little faster than I would have typically, but for a demonstration purposes, I like to kind of get it done a wee bit faster without speeding up the footage. I've done that before. Now watch, I'm going to go in here with a sharper edge of the colored pencil, and I'm going to enhance some of the wood grain just a little bit. Why not? You know, it's got a little bit of place where you can put some texture, and I can actually do that on the edge too, utilizing the same direction of lines that I was cross-hatching with early on in the story. I can do some of that up here too, why not? even though artists can make a drawing that looks photographic, should always incorporate something in there that lets you know that it was done with a tool. And that makes it kind of groovy and cool. And again, I'm going to add just a little bit more texture and tone to that dock top. And now I'm getting multiple different shades in that dock. Eventually we'll make it look super cool. So that is colored pencils. And that is one of the ways that you can color your page. I have got students that are ridiculously good at drawing with markers. Ridiculously good at it. And it drives me crazy because I don't have a ton of experience using markers, other than just generally using them, but markers have gotten better and better and better and better all the time, to the point where they're a pretty doggone good drawing tool or coloring tool now that they never were before. Let's pick something now that can be colored in with the markers that would be consistent all the way across. You know what it's going to be? It's going to be Baghead's overalls, and I'm going to make them a blue. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to kind of start putting in some color on his overalls. Now here's something too that we talked about very early on when we were starting to ink, is we wanted to use waterproof inks. Why? Now it's pretty obvious, because we don't want our ink lines to be ruined when we start coloring over the top of them with a marker. When we're coloring these in, gang, we want to think about it as a three-dimensional shape, and we want to think about it as how is light going to affect these areas. And allow yourself to kind of color it in with light sources and shadow and shading areas, so that it has that cool depth of field to what you're doing. And I purposely picked a light color for his overalls because I knew that it was going to make them dark. I knew if I was going to color in his overalls with, say, a darker blue, which would be my first guess, it would have made it really dark. And I want to kind of keep it light, because if I have to, I can darken it in the computer later on. But I want to add some yellow in there. I always like to get my highlights, and I'm going to try to get some yellow as a highlight, and it kind of turns it into a really pretty green. Okay, so I've got some colored pencils in here and some markers. Anything that you can use to color a work of art could be done on your comic page. For example, if you had pastel pictures, if you drew with, like, say, chalks. I did one of my horror comics was drawn with chalks. It can be done. It's not the recommended media to use for that, but it can be done. Make some very scary illustrations and freaky looking monsters when you actually get down to it. But you can also use watercolor. It has a tricky way about it that you never really can control 100% and never should control it 100%. This is a little mini set that you can get online for about 25 bucks, and it's really nice. It's a little travel kit. I'm going to use this normal set of watercolors here to just add some watercolor background. And when we're working with watercolors, we need some water, but we also need to work in a particular manner. I'm going to get my brushes wet, but I'm going to start with my yellows, and I want to start with the lightest tones and work towards the darkness. Because if I go from dark to light, as we've learned with the markers, it might not necessarily work the greatest. I'm going to want to go onto the horizon line and just put a little bit of warmth of the sun as it's going away over the top. And this is going to go from the one side all the way across, and it's very gentle tones here. Wash it up into, try not to get onto the bubble, a very light tone of yellow. And I've got a sheet of paper here that helps me to kind of see just how powerful and intense that color is. An intense, that's a word for colors. When something's an intense color, it's a very concentrated, pure tone of that color. It really stands out. Whereas if it's a little more muted, a little more pastel-like, it will be a little bit less than that. Got some trees there that we're seeing through. A little bit more color down to the edge. It sort of vanishes there. But again, that's only going to go up to a certain height. Leave it at that. And now one of the things that I could do is I could go in here and color everything that I want it to be, have that little touch of warmth to it. Probably want to do that right away. So let me just kind of get a little bit more color on there. Let it go up a little bit higher. This is going to be tricky because of these lines on there. That can be made to go away utilizing the computer. And that particular shade of blue is a non-repo blue. Non-reproduction blue is what that means. And in film and in production of art in the past, that blue would be something that you could draw with, and then it would disappear when the cameras looked at it. Whereas a red shade, it would be extremely black when you looked at it in black and white photography. Blue disappears, red makes it boom punch. So let's see here. Let's just kind of finish this up there. And now I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of a speed mode here so I can get a little bit more of my color. Boy, this color lesson was a long time coming, and to be honest with you, I was a little nervous because once this is done, there's no undoing it. I can't really fix this if it gets messed up, but it's coming along really nicely. I'm happy. I wasn't sure if this paper was going to be absorbent or not. Sometimes it doesn't cooperate, but this is really cooperating quite nicely. As a colorist, you guys, you have access to every color in your box, but that doesn't mean you necessarily want to use every color in the box. When you look at professional comic artists, they will actually go into the artwork with a limited palette. When you have a limited palette, that means that you're not incorporating every color that you have access to. You're limiting how many go, and that's a good thing because it can make it a little more classy. And you're making an artistic choice when you're doing that too. It's not just like you're throwing everything in there in the kitchen sink. You're actually limiting what colors you can use. I did a painting once that I used 7 colors on and managed to get a full tonal range all the way across it, and it turned out so nice. I learned a lot doing something like that. Painting sunsets with watercolors, oh my gosh, it's so perfect. It's such a perfect tool to do that because of its gentle nature, and it loves to kind of blend together with itself. Let that happen. Let it take control, and you'll end up with some really cool results. Really beautiful results. Okay, so my comic page is turning out really good. The watercolor is actually quite beautiful. It's making for an interesting page. I think I'm going to have some trouble on the edges, but I think Photoshop will be able to fix that, and a lot of time. But I want to get some greens in here next, and I know that that's not the next consecutive color, but I think green would be pretty cool with the trees and the grass and stuff like that. So let's find a shade of green that we can use. I've got that thing called atmospheric perspective that's happening in my drawings as well. It's like this back hill, that back mountain, I'm going to want that thinner and not quite as bright colors. There will be air molecules in the air between the greens that you'd see in the background. Nice. That actually is perfect. Perfect. And now the next layer, I want it to be a little more intense. I want to have just a tiny, oops, spattered some there. tiny little bit more green on the next layer. You can kind of see how that's working. Show a little bit of distance. Nice. Nice, 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 nice. And those trees are on that same level, so that sky, the green in their trees and the leaves and stuff can be just as intense. Let's finish this tree. Let's not worry about talking so much. Speed up the footage a little bit. This is going to be a long one. And now that we've got the trees done there, let's take some really strong pigment and kind of put a shadowed green in there, a really intense green. There we go. And underneath here too, get a little bit more. Come on now, be generous. Okay, I've almost got all the green done. Next color will probably be blue, maybe a little bit of brown, and then that's going to be it. I don't want to add too much more on top of that. The colors on the inside panels are going to be done with the computer because I want to be able to demonstrate that as well. And now this, I did not get this finished in a half an hour. This took a while. This took a lot of time to do it right, and don't ever be afraid of putting your time into the art that the art demands. I think a lot of people spend so much or can only spend so much time on their artwork, and then they're like, oh, done, I'm bored. And that's a shame, because if you have the ability to stay on it, stay on a task for a little bit longer than what the normal Joe can do, you're going to be a step ahead of them. I've got one little 7-year-old that is painting watercolor paintings now that are so involved and so beautiful, and he continues to work them to the point of almost having them overworked, honestly. But he is happy with the results, and they're interesting. They're so interesting, and that's what we can hope for. We can make something that'll have people turn and look at what we're creating. See what we're capable of doing that only we can do. Yep. This drawing of Baghead and this page of Baghead could have been done on the computer with AI art, and that's the big thing nowadays. But it would have been different. It would have been totally different than what I'm able to than what I'm able to create right here today for you. And that's the cool part about the human hand and what we are able to create with our time and our energies. So as you can see, I've kind of added some more blues, and I don't know if I'm going to add too much more watercolor to what we see here. I'm pretty happy with what we've got. I was considering painting in his black hoodie, but I think I'm going to have more luck and a little more control if I do that with the computer, and then it'll be consistent throughout the panels. Keeping these blues with the watercolor wash on it so you can actually see some of the textures of the paint, that was intentional. I want to see some of that little indication of how the watercolor behaves. And then I kind of got okay here where the two colors mixed, but when you're mixing blues and oranges, they're complementary colors, they don't mix very well. But I think it's going to work out. I probably should add a little bit more deeper blues. Right about in here. Let's do a little bit more blue right through there. Let's get up there. I don't know what happened there. And I actually went in with a dark and got his smoke right away too. Is that really this right here? Boy, that looks fantastic. So gang, my name is Mr. Craig. I'm with the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Green Bay, as well as the National Virtual Boys and Girls Club and Boys and Girls Club Creates. And I hope that you are staying motivated, excited, and creating some cool stories. See you soon, gang.